Well, welcome to Ninerology. I'm your host, Alan, and George Kittle got named second team All Pro and was snubbed of the first team All Pro um, in place of Brock Bowers of the Las Vegas Raiders. And as great as Brock Bowers is, great rookie, George Kittle was snubbed of a first team All Pro. George Kittle is by far the best tight end in the NFL, um, bar none. Bar none. That includes the likes of Travis Kelsey. That includes Brock Bowers. That includes any other tight end you want to throw into the mix. And yes, the league is filled with tons of great tight ends, but none on the same level as George Kittle. Let's just talk about the George Kittle and Brock Bowers comparison. I think first off that is atrocious. That is disrespectful to George Kittle. And you know what? I think George Kittle needs some respect. Why is the first team All Pro that important? Well, first off, let's talk about Pro Bowl, which is different than All Pro. Pro Bowlers, that's a popularity contest. That thing is, fans get to choose that. All Pro should be basically, this is the thing that players are striving for. They want to be All Pro. They want to be the best of the best at their position. That should encompass everything that they do on the field. Shouldn't take out outside bias. But for whatever reason, it seems now that that's not being considered anymore. Now, whatever happens on the field, now it's almost turning into a popularity contest because George Kittle and Brock Bowers, they shouldn't even be in the same sentence. As great of a season that Brock Bowers has had, George Kittle far exceeded that. Now let's just talk about a few things. As a tight end, it's not just about the catching. It's not just about the blocking. It's what you do to the team and how you elevate everybody. Now, some tight ends, they're just glorified receivers. They're a little bit bigger target, but George Kittle is the entire package. When he's in the game, he changes the offense, specifically on the rushing side. I just want to share a couple stats with you. When George Kittle is in the game, the 49ers average 5.1 yards per carry. That's right, 5.1 yards per carry. When he's not in the game, the 49ers rushing average drops to 3.9 yards per carry. That's when he's not on the field. When he's on the field, you're talking about over a yard average just because his presence there, not even because of anything else, but he's a receiving threat, but also he blocks like an outstanding tackle. You just see how many pancakes he has. In fact, you could just watch film on how he blocks, and he'd be an All-Pro and a Hall of Famer just with his blocking alone. And then you take into account his receiving. Now, this season, George Kittle had 2 fewer games than Brock Bowers, and I want to just share a few other stats when it comes to the receiving side. He had 34 fewer catches on 59 less targets, and he was only 88 yards fewer than Brock Bowers. That means on 34 catches, he was only 88 yards less. What does that break down to? That means George Kittle averaged 14.2 yards per catch to Brock Bowers' 10.7 yards per catch. George Kittle had 8 touchdowns. Brock Bowers had 5 touchdowns. Pro Football Focus had George Kittle rated as the number 1 tight end in the league out of 37 eligible tight ends. That takes into account receiving. That takes into account your run blocking. That takes into account of your EPA, your expected overage. In fact, let's break that down. George Kittle had 313 yards over expected on receiving. No other tight end was over 200. That's the value that George Kittle brings. He's a game changer. George Kittle played in 15 games this year, had 94 targets to Brock Bowers' 153 targets. Brock Bowers played all 17 games. Yes, can that be an argument? Absolutely, because the best ability is availability. But how George Kittle plays down in and down out, he's just a much better run blocker. He's a better receiving threat. He's a better yards after catch threat. And also, when it comes down to the red zone, he's a better threat there. Now, let's take into account the 49ers were the number 1 team in 2023 in red zone efficiency. Number 1. That meant when they were in the red zone, they were scoring touchdowns. This year, they were ranked at the bottom half of the league. And he still eclipsed 8 passing or receiving touchdowns. Brock Bowers only had 5. Now, Brock Bowers is a rookie. He's going to be a stud in this league. But the fact that they gave him the first team All-Pro almost feels like it's a popularity contest. The team really took Brock Bowers by storm because of some of the acrobatic catches. But when you look at run blocking, it is nowhere near the run blocking that George Kittle does. George Kittle is on a different level, different tier. We like to talk about tiers when it comes to quarterbacks. The same thing goes into effect when it comes to tight ends. There is a top tier of tight end who is receiving and blocking. Then there's top receiving, there's top blocking, and then there's the average. George Kittle does everything excellent. When he goes on the field, it doesn't matter if they have a winning record, doesn't matter if they're winning, they're losing. He is going all out 110%. And you're probably asking, George Kittle's already been a first team All Pro. Why does it matter if he does this? Well, I'll tell you why. Why is it important for players to be considered first team All Pro versus second team All Pro? I want to remind you that George Kittle's in a contract year. Not that he doesn't have other years on his contract. The 49ers need to extend him this offseason because they want to address the cap. They have other players to play. But also, you want to lock up George Kittle for the rest of his career. That way he stays in red and gold until he retires. As a second team All Pro, that isn't as... Well, there go the balloons. Yeah, if he would have got first team All Pro, that would have got the balloons. But as a second team All Pro, the organization can come back and say, oh, you've lost this step. Somebody else is doing better than you. You still have room to grow. And yes, all players have room to grow. But if he had that first team All Pro, he can tell management, you know what? I am still the best. Yes, at the age of 30, 31, I am still the best tight end in the league. Nobody is on my level. But because the All Pro decision makers got this wrong, guess what? Business is a business, and you have those negotiators that are going to use that against him. Say, sorry, you got second team All Pro. Yeah, we'll give you a contract. We'll give you an extension. We'll take care of you, but we're not going to pay you what you should be getting paid because somebody else got first team All Pro. So I think that is a huge slap in the face, and I'm hopeful that Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch and company can see that the decision makers got this wrong. That George Kittle led the league when it came to expected receiving yards over expectation, 313. And again, no other tight end got more than 200. That means George Kittle exceeded expectation every time he had the ball in his hands. Now, to put it even in further perspective, the 49ers have one of the worst offensive lines in the entire league, which tells you that even with the 59 fewer targets that George Kittle had, that's because he was back in pass blocking, run blocking, and doing all of those things. Can you imagine if he had 59 additional targets? If he had 34 more catches? Let's do a little bit of math here. I'm going to go ahead and pull out my phone real quick. Let's say he had 34 more catches. We talked about 34 fewer catches. And his average is 14.2 yards per catch. That comes down to another 482 receiving yards. That would put him over 1,500 yards this season. That essentially would seal the Hall of Fame for him. George Kittle has 4 1,000 yards receiving. 4 seasons of 1,000 yards. He does it one more time, he's going to be the only tight end to ever do that in the history of the NFL. Now, I know All Pro is based off the current season. You can't take into account what he's done in the past. But this season alone, he was still the best tight end in the entire league. Bar none. You put him at receiver, let's just say you didn't block, he would probably be one of the top 10 receivers in the entire league. Oh yeah, but he doesn't have the speed that other receivers. The way he maneuvers the ball, he could play basketball. For all I know, he played basketball earlier in his career because the way he boxes out, the way he finds the open space, his run after the catch, he has such great vision. Just take a look, YouTube his highlight reels. If you do that, you can see it doesn't take one guy to take him down, but also when he's in the open field, he knows how, he has the vision to find the open space to get that extra 5, 10, 15 yards after the catch. He is a quarterback's best friend. You want to know why Brock Purdy's getting paid this offseason? George Kittle. That's right, George Kittle. George Kittle is the reason that Brock Purdy is getting paid. In fact, George Kittle probably should have received a Tacoma or Tundra from Brock Purdy. Maybe he did, but from the video I saw, it was just offensive lineman. But the way George Kittle blocks and pass blocks and also catches, he probably should have received one as well. I know this is just a rant and all of that stuff, but you know what? My heart breaks for George Kittle. And Clark, George, you were done wrong. Yes, second team All Pro is nothing to, I guess, whine about, because that's still some great accolades. But the reality is you should have been a first team All Pro. The reality is you are still the best tight end in football, even the way you play. And the way you play the game, I'm sure when your career is done, you're going to have aches and pains for the rest of your life. But you would have said that you've done it with no regrets. You played this game the right way with no regrets. You showed what it is to be a all-around tight end, which means I'm willing to do the dirty work in the trenches and have certain games where I only catch, am targeted one time in the entire game. And I'm not going to pout about that because if our team wins, it was worth it. You're okay with blocking for Christian McCaffrey and the rest of the team because you're willing to say, you know what? If this is a dirty game, which is low scoring, and we need to run the ball well 40 times a game, I will block 40 times a game and not ask to be taken out because that's who I am. I have one speed, and that's 100 miles an hour. And I'm going to do that every time because I'm going to set the tone. I'm going to set the culture, and that's what I expect every other player to do. And I'm going to lead by example. And so, to John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan, to Parag, to Jed York, pay the man what he's worth. Give him what he's worth. Have him be in red and gold the rest of his career. Do not use this first-team All-Pro snub against him. He should be a first-team All-Pro. And the fact that he wasn't is highway robbery. And George Kittle, you're a first-team All-Pro in my book, again, for this year. And you know what? I am very hopeful that the team will honor your play and not drag out these negotiations. I hope that it'll just be a couple things where like, hey, we want to take care of you. What do you want? And then that they would be willing to write you a blank check because you deserve it. You deserve it. And yes, you're 31, and I think you're still going to be the best tight end in the league for years to come. I think you have a few more years of being the number one tight end. And guess what? Yeah, you might lose a step in a few years, but guess what? The way you play the game, you'll still be the most valuable tight end in the league. And I think if you were to end your career now, you would be a Hall of Famer. You probably need another year or two of the same level of play to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. But you played the game right. You played the game right. The way you run block, the way you pass block, the way you down the field block. If a receiver catches it, you're running down the field looking for somebody to block so that way they can score. And again, the proof is in the stats. It's in the numbers. Proof's in the numbers. And it passes the eye test. Again, when you're on the field, the 49ers rushing average is 5.1 yards per carry. When you're off the field, it's 3.9 yards per carry. You had 34 fewer catches, and we're still only 88 yards behind Brock Bowers. You average over 4 yards per catch more than Brock Bowers. You had 3 more receiving touchdowns than Brock Bowers. You were the number 1 rated tight end for both receiving and pass blocking and run blocking, according to Pro Football Focus, much higher than Brock Bowers. And so, again, the decision makers got this wrong, but George Kittle, I'm on your side. You're number 1 first-team All-Pro in my books, and here's the hoping that leadership, management, ownership sees that and that you are compensated very well this offseason because you, Claire, and the family deserve it. And again, you're all pro in my book. And that's all we have today for Ninerology. I saw that the announcement was made today. I thought, you know what? We need to talk about this. Not enough people are talking about it. Again, as good as Brock Bowers is, he is not a first-team All-Pro. Sure, make him a second-team All-Pro. Pro Bowler's fine. First team All-Pro, no, that's a slap in the face to George Kittle. That's a slap in the face. And hopefully next year they get it right. But this year it's a shame that it was because it was highway robbery. But again, that's all we have. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And we'll catch you next time. George Kittle, you are the man, best tight end in the league. And hope you have a great offseason. Come back healthy. And